Love him or hate him, Stephen King has had a massive impact on horror, both in the literary world and the film world. From Lovecraftian ancient aliens to supernatural forces of evil, he has a wide selection of tales that connect with audiences of various backgrounds. However, sometimes that magic is lost on the big screen where the source material is adapted very poorly. Before we begin though, please give us a like, share and subscribe to our channel. Every new sub helps us achieve our goal and keeps us motivated to create new content with you in mind. With that being said, I am your host Sarah, and here are 10 terrible Stephen King films that need a remake. Enjoy. Number 1. Cell. While not the greatest novel in the plethora of works written by one and only Stephen King, it is a fairly straightforward and bloody good time. In the novel, a strange signal begins transmitting on all sorts of electrical devices, which causes people to start losing their minds and becoming super violent. Basically like the not zombies of 28 Days Later. While those lucky enough to have not been on a phone or listening to a radio or whatever remain uninfected, they must now traverse a landscape covered in violent psychopaths. We mainly follow Clay, who is just trying to get home to his family when the shit hits the fan. He finds some stray survivors along the way, as they do in most zombie-esque type films, including Tom McCourt and Alice Maxwell, each with their own harrowing tales of survival. But then something strange begins to happen, as they all begin to share dreams about a strange man in a red hoodie. Someone that Clay has been drawing pictures of for months before all this kicked off. So who is this Harvard Harbinger? And what does he want? Well, the film doesn't really explain much beyond the cell zombs, basically, acting like a flock of birds and forming some kind of hive mind. And neither does the book, which is what brings me to this list. I would love it if someone could come up with a better, more definitive ending to the whole thing. Like how Frank Darabont altered the ending of The Mist and gave the characters some real depth, instead of just being interchangeable meatbags fleeing in terror. However, if you want to catch the original film, head over to Pluto, Plex, Prime, Apple TV or Fandango to check it out. Number 2. The Dark Tower. Oh, this one hurts the most in my opinion, as I am a lifelong fan of King's and this is one of those stories I really wanted to see a full Lords of the Rings treatment for. But what we got, well, it just wasn't that. They didn't even really adapt the books, which for those unaware, there's 7 of them just like the Harry Potter franchise. And instead they took bits and pieces from the various novels and kind of made up a pseudo sequel of sorts. Casting choices aside, although I do want to say Matthew McConaughey was a great choice for the Man in Black, aka Walter O'Dim. The whole film just felt too new age cyberpunk sci-fi-ish. If you're unfamiliar with the books, they take place primarily in this dimension called Midworld, a space between realities where all of the Stephen King books are kind of connected. This world is like a cross between the Wild West of Clint Eastwood films and the void from MCU's Loki and Deadpool and Wolverine. Things from other realities get trapped here, including nightmarish Lovecraftian monsters, and whatever lives here has tried to make a life for itself. While there are sci-fi elements, there's also a ton of fantasy elements, and this is something that the film was sorely missing, as it focused more on trying to be cool with its slow motion bullet time shots and all that type of garbage. Regardless, the series is long enough that it should be adapted in long form, as a streaming show or at very least one film per book. Luckily, I do hear that Mike Flanagan is attempting to do so currently. But for those of you who want to check this dumpster fire out, head over to Netflix, Prime, Apple TV or Fandango. Number 3. Dreamcatcher. I've often heard people say that this is King's first real foray into aliens, which I didn't quite understand because of his previous books like It and the Tommy Knockers, and so forth, clearly dealing with extraterrestrial beings, but then it hit me. The way these particular aliens are described is the more traditional style of aliens that American pop culture is familiar with. Tall, slender, grey skin with big round heads and big black eyes. The kind of aliens that Mulder was trying to track down and save his sister from. You know, the ones that also gave Cartman the anal probe. No, of course, this is a King book, so this isn't their true form. They are actually these giant tentacle worm type things with tons of sharp teeth, and they just want to eat you. They do not want to study you. They came equipped with telepathic abilities as well, so they can take over people's bodies or make people believe that they don't even exist. I still laugh at that one scene of the one survivor who the friends rescued experiencing his first shit weasel, and to this day when I accomplish something, I raise my hands in victory and proclaim, I did it. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that, I couldn't find it. But great memories aside, this film is filled with plot inconsistencies, hit or miss acting and pacing issues, and overall could have really adapted the source material a bit better and made the film more scary. Maybe if the Muschietis get their hands on this property, they could work their magic, the way that Stephen King did. Until then, to satisfy your curiosity, head over to Google Play, Apple TV, Prime or Fandango. Number 4, The Night Flyer. So you know how in Bram Stoker's Dracula, the master vampire was often transported in a coffin via horse and cart by his loyal servant Renfield to stay ahead of the mobs who have slowly figured out what he is and they vowed to destroy him. Well, what would that be like in modern day? He'd fly by airplane, of course, and that's exactly what happens in this story. A vampire who travels at night from airport to airport, claiming his victims there before departing to the next one. Now maybe this would be much harder to pull off post 9/11, given how airport security is and especially with everything going on in the US regarding travel because of our current administrations. But maybe if this was set in like the 80s or 90s, it could make an interesting point of view type of film. Following this vampire around as it claims his many victims, it certainly would be a very unique way from traditional gothic horror, or even the action-packed vampire offerings that are so abundant. This would definitely need some charismatic to play this titular bloodsucker as well. Maybe someone like Benedict Cumberbatch, or if they wanted to go more American, Brad Pitt, who would have no trouble charming a young beautiful woman and then draining her of her essence. Either way, if you want to catch the original, head over to YouTube, Plex or Fandango. Number 5, The Langalers. So Interstellar introduced the theoretical idea to many audiences that time could be a physical construct. While the theory is way older than that film, a lot of people hadn't actually thought about or understood the concept, and so let me clarify it as simply as I can. If you and I exist in the third dimension, the physical dimension as we perceive it, then the fourth dimension is time, a force that controls us by constantly propelling us forward, responsible for aging, growth and decay, etc. However, many Lovecraftian and extra-dimensional beings exist in the fifth dimension, outside of time, hence why they are immortal. They experience everything all at once, the beginning and the end, and it's infinite. To them, time is a marble that they can change the shape of and unmake or remake if they so desire. It's kinda crazy, right? Well, there's way more to it, and I highly recommend that you check out videos about quantum physics. But the gist of what you need to know for this entry is time can exist as a physical property. So what happens when time takes a snapshot and moves on? What happens to that snapshot? Well, just like those temporary cookies on your PC, those previous snapshots get deleted every time the system reboots. And how does it get deleted? By the Langalers, of course. In this story, they are these extra-dimensional entities known as Langalers, which are basically time eaters, so that time can be recycled and reused. They eat what is no longer needed to be converted into energy to be used for the future and so forth. Except somehow during some crazy storm and celestial event, a group of airplane passengers inadvertently get stuck in a moment of time, and they must find a way to get unstuck before they too are devoured by these mind-breaking creatures. The premise is crazy and cool enough that it could make an interesting and terrifying concept film, especially in the hands of someone like Christopher Nolan, but unfortunately the only time it was adapted was in the early 90s, and they used some of the cheapest special effects they had to bring this monster to life. Let's just say it looks awful, and the acting is way worse. But if you can't resist having a look for yourself, head over to YouTube Prime or Fandango to check it out. Number 6, The Stand. I have a huge soft spot for the original mini-series adaptation starring Gary Sinise, Molly Ridgewell and Rob Lowe. Moon, that spells nostalgia. It was directed by Mick Garris, responsible for bringing a lot of King's work to the small screen, and you can tell he has a lot of love for the source material. Just not the budget to match, unfortunately. Then again, this book is a whopping 1,153 pages long, so it's definitely got a lot going on that needs to be adapted, and that's hard to do with a single film, let alone even a short episode count miniseries. I'm going to ignore the 2020 version here because even though it had a bigger budget, it was so much worse. So much worse than the original 93 version, and it took so many liberties with the plot details and whatnot that it was just nothing endearing or compelling going for it. That being said, the original isn't a masterpiece by any means, again mainly due to the budget and technology available at the time, so there's definitely room for improvement. At one point in time while Affleck was donning the Batsuit, he was actually tapped to write and direct a big screen adaptation of The Stand, but it just never materialised, probably due to the turmoil surrounding his life at that time, and so I've heard nothing about anyone else taking over his place. This is something I'd love to see either the Duffer Brothers of Stranger Things fame or Jonathan Nolan, who you might know from shows like Westworld and Persons of Interest, to tackle and bring this magnus opus to a platform like Max or Prime. In the meantime though, check out the 93 classic by heading over to Apple TV, Prime or Fandango. Number 7, The Tommy Knockers. Late last night and the night before, Tommy Knockers knocking at my door. I want to go out, don't know if I can because I'm so afraid of the Tommy Knocker man. Tommy Knockers was originally released in 1987 in the form of a novel, before eventually being adapted into a TV miniseries in 1993 by John Power. While it did boast a pretty notable cast, at least for the 90s TV, with a modest budget of $12 million, the film is definitely of its time, with some cheesy effects and some pretty atrocious acting. The plot revolves around two writers who live on the outskirts of Haven, Maine, which they also made a TV show called Haven some years later based on the novel The Colorado Kid. So it's separate to that. One day, we're tending to her garden, Bobby stumbles across the strange stone object buried in the dirt. As they begin excavating it out, strange things begin happening to the people in the town. What they unearth seems to be some kind of strange miracle machine, which helps people invent some crazy stuff, all powered by this odd green glowing energy. Turns out though, this machine actually belongs to a race of ancient alien life forms, and it's been sapping their town of their life energy to basically bring back their dead. It's actually quite a compelling and interesting sci-fi horror novel, and if directed by someone with keen sense of mystery, say like J.J. Abrams with Jonathan Nolan panning the script, this could make for some excellent TV series, if not at least a fun film on Netflix or so on. However, go and check out the original over on the Roku channel or Plex. Very limited where you can watch it. Number 8, The Graveyard Shift. Very few people enjoy working the late night shift, sleeping throughout the day and basically only living at night. Perfect for vampires, I suppose. However, what if your job entailed you having to go into dank, musty basements and flush out rodents to exterminate them? On top of that, what if those rats were the size of dogs or even larger than that? able to eat a whole man. That's pretty much the premise of this body horror offering from the master of macabre. And while the film is pretty gruesome in some moments, it doesn't hold a candle to the over-top violence that the original novel has in store. The film would be perfect for someone like Eli Roth to get his hands on, as he loves doing practical gore effects and could really lay into it with the source material. Sure, giant rats seem a bit cheesy, so maybe he can take some liberties and really mutate them or something, kind of like the Rat King from the VHS series or so. Just take it to an out of this world kind of horror element. But if you are spooked by feral rodents or afraid of being eaten alive, definitely go and head over and check this out on Pluto, Prime, Apple TV or Fandango. Number 9, Children of the Corn. I want to say this particular story has been remade at least 3 times with several spin-off sequels as well, and still they have never managed to outdo the very mediocre classic 80s version starring Linda Hamilton, Peter Horton and John Franklin. At one point or another, as a King fan, I'm sure you've heard other King fans cry out, Malachi! Because the scene from the film is both absurd and also absurdly hilarious. The trouble with each of these offerings so far is they are pretty slow, with not a lot of on-screen kills, or they lean too heavily into the supernatural aspect and it ends up looking like Galactus from the original Fantastic Four movie, A Big Neon Cloud. If a filmmaker were to truly want to terrify audiences, they should totally go for broke with having these kids brutally slaughter members of the town every 5 minutes on screen or up until they pretty much have wiped everyone out, and then bring in our new protagonists. Keep the pacing tight and adrenaline fueled while keeping he who walks beneath the rose shrouded more in mystery. The other thing that's crucial in casting the kids themselves. They need to both be endearing but also sinister and menacing when they switch to their more cult-like personalities. However, given how censorship works and the Hollywood labour laws regarding child actors, which is a good thing, I don't know how far they would be able to go or willing to. I heard a rumour about Andy Muschietti of It Chapter 1 or 2 fame has option to bring this story to life, so if it turns out to be true, maybe we will get a gory version that we can all enjoy. But for now, head over to Tubi, Roku, Sling, Prime, Redbox, Apple TV, Fandango, loads of places to check this out. Number 10, Storm of the Century. This film is different from others on the list as it didn't start as a book by King and was instead written as a film script by King himself directly. It's a take on the real-life historical mystery of Roanoke, Virginia, where seemingly overnight an entire town disappeared, leaving behind food on tables and candles burning and whatnot, and the only clue was the word Croatan carved into a nearby tree. In this version, King summarises that basically the devil, also known as Randall Flagg in various other novels of his, is looking for a child that he can basically switch bodies with. He makes it seem like he will raise the child in his image, but there are clues throughout that imply that once the child is old enough and has mastered black magic, that he will then swap his soul with the soul of the child and basically be reborn. In this mini-series, he goes by the name Andrew Lineage, which if you rearrange those letters spells We Are Legion. He uses a combination of magic powers and telepathic manipulation to turn the members of the small Maine town against one another, and strike fear into their hearts, before finally revealing to them what he wants from them, one of their children. Of course, the town gathers and holds a meeting, deciding to pull straws to see which child should be offered, reasoning that it's better to sacrifice one than lose everyone. That is except for Constable Mike Anderson, played and voiced of animated Superman himself, Tim Daly. He refuses to give in to his evil man's demands, and yet his wife goes along with the town. Unfortunately, it ends up being his own son who is chosen, and while it's quite the bittersweet ending, while the film is a fun watch, it was made for TV and unfortunately at the time had a lot of restrictions on what they were able to do or show. But since streaming has become the mainstream and censorship is a lot looser now, it would be cool for a modern remake of the story, featuring some compelling actors in key roles, and maybe directed by Mike Flanagan, who has done an amazing job bringing King stories to life. Make sure to watch the original over on Hulu, Disney Plus or Fandango. Thank you for checking out our video. What was your favourite Stephen King film of all time? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell icon to stay up to date with all our latest releases. You can reach out to us on Twitter @StudioFat or chat with us on Discord, which will be linked in the description below. I have been your host Sarah, and remember kids, we all float down here. Have a beautiful day everyone, and see you soon. Goodbye.